Hey, this week, before we kick off the fantasy show, I want to remind you to check out sportsfluent.com. We have the GOAT Chronicles, and it's part 2 of our first series, Jordan versus LeBron. And part 1 and 2 are all about their competition. So be sure to check that out. Part 3 will be coming next week. That's the GOAT Chronicles on sportsfluent.com. So let's jump into the fantasy football for this week with our starts and sits. We're going to kick things off like we always do at the quarterback position. And this week, we've got a start. And he had a horrible game last week. In fact, on the Sports Fluent podcast, we talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And his performance was in the ugly. That was Tom Brady, who threw a bunch of interceptions, got blown out by the Saints last week, and looked horrible. Looked all of his 40-plus years. And this week, though, he's going to be a start. This is, if there was such a thing as a lock for the week for me, Tom Brady at Carolina is going to have a bounce-back game and remind everybody he's the GOAT. So if you got Tom Brady, go ahead and start him. The next QB to start, it's Tua time. When I was asked earlier in the season about Tua, the first thing that I always said was, I feel like they brought him in too early. Fitzpatrick was playing well, the Dolphins were playing well, and I didn't really understand the move at quarterback. And his first week was a little shaky. But last week against Kyler Murray, he looked good, and he looked like he's going to get better. And I talked about, again on the podcast, I talked about those two and some others really kind of, taking the torch from the, Drew Brees and Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Phillip Rivers, all these guys, Ben Roethlisberger, who, they're on the tail end of their career, but the quarterback position looks really strong with the younger guys that are in the league. And this week he's got a good matchup against another good young quarterback in Justin Herbert. So look for Tua to have another big game. Keep this in mind. The Chargers defense, 3 games in a row now, have given up at least 2 touchdowns to the quarterback position. So with the yards that he's going to get, plus a couple of touchdowns, he's, especially if you're a Patrick Mahomes owner and you need someone to stream in at quarterback and you can get a hold of Tua, he's a start this week. To our sits. I feel like I'm saying his name a lot when it comes to sits, but this week, bad matchup against Baltimore. He doesn't look right, hasn't looked right in a few years, but Cam Newton obviously is a sit this week against Baltimore. And this one, the second sit for the QBs, this one's going to be, I'll say it's 90%, because if Kenny Golladay is out, right, Matthew Stafford should be a sit. If Golladay somehow returns and he's playing, then you might want to think about playing Stafford, because in the games that Golladay hasn't played, hasn't put up a lot of fantasy points. Obviously, then in the games that he has, he's been much better. So if Golladay is out, Matthew Stafford is a sit. I feel I just said this guy's name. The sleeper for this week is Phillip Rivers. Let's hope that he's not trying to tackle anybody, because that was kind of embarrassing. But as a quarterback this week, he's up against Tennessee, and they've given up at least 249 yards and 2 touchdowns 7 weeks in a row to quarterbacks. So you're in a good position here with that matchup. If you're in a 2 QB league, or again, you're really desperate, you're in a 12-team league, and again, maybe you have Mahomes or one of your quarterbacks is out, Phillip Rivers, sleeper this week. The one to watch out for. So, I've talked a lot about Joe Burrow this week because he's been playing really well behind that really shaky offensive line in Cincinnati. But this week against that Pittsburgh defense, I'd shy away from him. In fact, in one of my leagues, I have Joe Burrow as my backup. Patrick Mahomes is my quarterback, and I dropped him. And I got to remember who I picked up. But I picked up another QB because this wasn't the matchup. I went with Jared Goff. But that's a deep league with not many quarterbacks to choose from. So, but I'm liking even Goff over Burrow this week. So watch out for Burrow. It's a tough matchup for him. So we'll jump down to our first question. Top waiver targets this week. So I'll give it. So the first one is dependent. If David Johnson is hurt, I like Duke Johnson. I like Duke Johnson as a flex play. If David Johnson was one, probably hopefully he's in your flex. You didn't draft him too high, but Duke Johnson one that can get some surprising, going to get some surprising run this week. I think if David Johnson does, in fact, doesn't play. The other one, and this one, a lot of these guys obviously are very much based on injuries, but if he's healthy, he's listed as questionable today, but he is set to return this weekend, is John Brown of the Bills. When John Brown is healthy, him and Josh Allen have a chemistry where he started off the season, if you remember, pretty good, and then he got hurt. So John Brown's one that I would pick up if you can. Again, more of a flex play and a filler, but John Brown's a good one to look for. To our running back starts and sits. This one, you got to be careful with this one, but I think Kareem Hunt is going to be a good start this week against Houston. They've given up 4 TDs in the last 3 games to running backs. And although Nick Chubb is set to return, you don't know how many carries, how many touches he's actually going to get. I think Hunt will also try to, make sure the team doesn't forget about him and how well he played while Chubb was injured. And the way Cleveland does play, though, in most matchups, you can go with either one, Hunt or Chubb. So again, it's a good matchup against Houston. So Kareem Hunt is a start this week. The second one, and I gotta tell you, I made a big mistake because Christian McCaffrey was coming back. I needed to fill some other holes, and I dropped Mike Davis. I did. I dropped him. I dropped Mike Davis. And now it looks like Christian McCaffrey is hurt again with his shoulder injury. He might not play. And in the league that I dropped him, he got picked up right away. And now he's a start this week because it's a good matchup against Tampa. Not a great matchup, but a good matchup, especially in PPR leagues with Mike Davis. And so if Christian McCaffrey is out with that shoulder injury, Mike Davis start this week. To our sits, Melvin Gordon of the Broncos. They're playing in Las Vegas, and not that that's it's mid-level kind of range in terms of the opponent, but it looks like Philip Lindsay has really started to kind of assert himself in the backfield as well. So it's really become a committee. So I think that's a bad sign for Melvin Gordon. So Melvin Gordon is a sit. And the second one, man, this guy's run was just like, bam, it was a flash, and now it's gone. DJ Dallas, who looked good in the opportunities he had, but Homer started to take some of his carries away. Looks like Chris Carson's going to be returning this week for Seattle. So, if that happens, then for sure, DJ Dallas is definitely a sit. To our sleeper, Duke. Well, I feel like I just said his name. So Duke Johnson at Cleveland. With David Johnson out, Duke Johnson's going to be kind of that one that should have a good game, right? So watch out for him. Like I said, if you could slide him into your flex position. The one to watch out for, and this is, all season, the Rams backfield has been just an enigma wrapped in a conundrum. Like I don't even think they can figure it out. But Darrell Henderson, watch out for him. He's had a thigh injury, so he's not fully healthy. He's going to split carries with Malcolm Brown and Cam Akers, not as much as Brown, but still a little bit, especially if he's injured. Thigh injuries, right? It's one of those ones, especially on running backs, where he can come in and look good maybe the first series or two, but like if he just gets hit the wrong way, takes typically a shoulder into the leg, and they're just going to sit him out the rest of the game. So be careful. If you're having to start Darrell Henderson. To question 2, QB streamer for this week, for week 10. All right, there's a lot of good QBs in this league. And so that's why we always say when you draft your quarterback late, because you can get a quality quarterback late in drafts, and you're better off obviously picking up running backs, wide receivers ahead of quarterbacks. But this week, the streamers, so Tua, who I already mentioned, he's still available, surprisingly, in quite a few leagues. So Tua, if you can get your hands on him. And Drew Lock, who's actually surprisingly been playing very well the last few weeks. He's another one that if you got to stream a quarterback, Mahomes being the big name that's on bye this week, definitely go with one of those two guys, Locke or Tua. To our wide receivers. So this one is going to be interesting because there's two wide receivers and you never really know. There's a couple wide receivers, but two typically that you never know which one's going to get the ball more, Robert Woods or Cooper Kupp. I'm starting Cooper Kupp because against Seattle, because Seattle's defense has actually given up the most points to wide receivers of any. We think back to the Seattle defense and you think of, the Legion of Boom, and then, they brought in Adams, and I know he's been hurt, and then they trade for Dunlop out of Cincinnati. This defense is it's giving up a lot of yards, a lot of fantasy points to wide receivers. And I think Woods and Kupp have a big, big day, both of them in Seattle, but I like Cooper Kupp. My next one, and this is what I'm really happy to say because I picked him up on waivers a few weeks ago in a couple of my leagues, and his breakout season was supposed to be last year. Didn't really happen, but Christian Kirk has started to look really good in Arizona, playing alongside DeAndre Hopkins. Right, Hopkins obviously is a start every week. Larry Fitzgerald, we thought, we knew his fantasy value was a little low, but Christian Kirk the last few weeks has played really, really, really well, and against the Buffalo defense. They've allowed 3 times 3 pairs of wide receivers to score at least 14 PPR points in the same game. So don't feel like, well, DeAndre Hopkins is going to get all the love here, because Buffalo gives up multiple double-digit fantasy points to 2 wide receivers in about half of their games. So if you need, again, I put him in at my flex. If you need a flex, Christian Kirk is a nice one to pick up. Who I'm sitting this week at the wide receiver position is Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings. For all the issues that the Bears offense is having, and we've talked about it a lot on the podcast, episode 49 out right now. In the fix, it's the Chicago Bears offense and how we fix it. But their defense has still been solid. They've only allowed 3 touchdowns this whole season to wide receivers. So as the wide receiver 2, which he's clearly become in Minnesota, he's still a sit against that Bears defense. The next one is, and keep in mind, this is just a sit this week. You should have picked this guy up if you haven't already, but you're kind of stashing him. And it's Jacoby Myers, right? Again, the Patriots against the Baltimore defense, they've allowed the 5th fewest points to wide receivers in fantasy this year. And the Patriots passing game just isn't that good. So I would definitely sit Jacoby Myers this week. However, I would keep him. He's not one of the guys that I would drop. Sleepers. So this, I don't know if he shouldn't be a sleeper, because I think this week he's going to be the number 1 option. And I think maybe even moving forward, even when some of the other players come back off injury, Brandon Ayuk against New Orleans this week, I think he's going to be Nick Mullen's number 1 target. And so if you can pick him up, or if you have him as a sleeper, but I think he's going to have a big game. So watch out for that. Speaking of watching out, one of my guys, and I'm in a tough position because I have him in one of my leagues as well, and I'm thinking I might have to drop him, but is Travis Fulgham from the Philadelphia Eagles. He's got a good matchup against the New York Giants, so people are going to kind of see the matchup, see what he's done so far this season when he's had an opportunity, and they're going to play him. I get that. The problem is Goddard, who did not have a good return last week, but I think will get some more targets this week out of the tight end position. His 2nd week back now off of injury. I think he's going to be a bigger part of the offense. And it looks like Alshon Jeffrey is going to be back as well. And not that I think Alshon Jeffrey is going to have a big game against the Giants, but I do think he's obviously going to suck some of those targets up. And they also have, and we're going to talk about him in a second, but Jalen Reagor. So there's a lot of competition for targets with the Eagles offense right now. So just watch out for Travis Fulham, who I would have said typically would have been a start if those guys obviously weren't coming back. Speaking of that, so to our questions, and we just talked about one of them. Who should I stream? Tight end streamers for Week 10. So I mentioned the first one is if you have GoDirt, he's still available in half of the leagues. I think he's available in 52% of NFL.com leagues. So GoDirt is one definitely that I would start. And it's not just because I'm a Bears fan. It's not because I just said their offense is horrible. But the one kind of piece that they've been okay at is Jimmy Graham. So again, this is just a streamer for this week. I like the matchup. I would go with Jimmy Graham as well. Let's go to the second question too. So this one I love. The question is, what do I do with Tyler Lockett? Should I bench him? I have Curtis Samuel, T. Higgins, and Jalen Reagor. No, you don't bench Tyler Lockett. You put him in and you play him. I don't care how bad of a week he had last week or the week before or whatever the reason you're thinking is. The chemistry he has with Russell Wilson is too strong. They're not that far removed where I believe they had the highest completion percentage of any quarterback wide receiver tandem, like in the league, if not in the history of the league. Yes, he's going to have some bad games. Yes, some teams are going to scheme to kind of take away what he does. But Tyler Lockett is a wide receiver that you put in and play every single week. In fact, probably so is DK Metcalf for that matter. Their defense is horrible, right? So they're going to throw the ball a lot. He's going to get opportunities, a bad game or two or a stretch of bad games. You keep Tyler Lockett. If you don't want him, let me know. I'll take him off your hands. So no, I wouldn't take him out for any of those guys, pretty much in any situation. Tyler Lockett is a plug-and-play wide receiver. Where are we? Tight ends. All right, tight ends. So start this week, TJ Hawkinson versus Washington is a nice matchup. And Eric Ebron, who kind of, up and down. We've had him on the start list. We've had him on the sit list. We've had him on the sleeper. We've had him on the waiver wire. We've had him on the drop list. He's they've given a start. This week, it's kind of the opposite of that because he's getting those players back, and that's going to affect the amount of targets that he gets. The next sit at the tight end position is Tyler Higbee. So Tyler Higbee is in Seattle, and we talked about Seattle's defensive problems